Welcome everyone to GW. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a real privilege in store. More of a conversation with someone who clearly needs no introduction, Kevin Mandia. But for those of you who don't know, Kevin is CEO at FireEye. He's been in that position at the helm since 2016, if I'm not mistaken. He came to FireEye from Mandia, which was at the bleeding edge of cybersecurity related issues. And a company he bootstrapped, started on his own, grew exponentially. When I look back on the cyber discussion and discourse we're having today, I honestly feel Mandia deserves a ton of credit for its report on APT1, which was the smoking keyboard in terms of some of the activity the rest of us couldn't really talk about, but may have had some insights on. So I think Mandia changed the discussion, changed the discourse, and quite honestly deserves a ton of credit for coming out with attribution on cyber-related issues. And I got to turn on my mic. I am loud and never had an unspoken thought, but truth is Kevin's been at the forefront of these issues for a number of years. Started his career at the Air Force, where he was with the 7th Group, if I'm not mistaken. He also served as a special agent at the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, which was one of the very early cyber forces in U.S. government history. Dare I say, he has a degree from not only Lafayette, but also George Washington University in forensics. So, Kevin, this is a real treat. I know you've got a tight schedule. What I was thinking is maybe a conversation for about 40 minutes and then open it up to Q&A. And again, thank you for taking time to join us today. I mean, let's start with where you see the state of the threat, the risk, what are the vectors we ought to be thinking about, who are the actors we ought to be thinking about. What's changed since your watershed report with APT1?
Well,
and what's remained consistent?
Well, first, let me just start with, it's great to be here. I'm here by accident. Since Frank mentioned my GW degree, I came here to go to school to get out of cybersecurity. And, I always wanted to be a Quincy blood and guts forensicator. It's a made-up word for those of you that
Kevin, is your mic on?
But not, well, you know what? There we go. How's that? The green means on. There we go.
And thank you to our viewers watching at home.
Hey, I wanted to make you look good. We both can't pull this one off. There's only one knob on this damn thing, and neither of us can figure it out. Where's the instruction manual? Anyway, so I tried to get out of doing computer security. My first time was at the Pentagon in 1993. Like all second lieutenants, when you get signed to the Pentagon, the first thing you do is volunteer to Thule, Greenland to get out of the Pentagon or anywhere else you can get to. But after 2 years at the Pentagon doing computer security, I kept thinking blood and guts forensics would be neat, got my GW degree, thinking that would get me out of this computer security stuff. And I never saw the future of, if you're great at computer science and computer security, and you learn forensics, it actually more deeply entrenches you in the tradecraft that I'm still practicing today. But it's been a fun ride. It was fun. Enjoyed walking GWU back then. What do we have to worry about today? It's almost hard to tell you this sitting down. But I'm not a fear, uncertainty, and doubt guy. We do over 600 investigations a year into what happened and what to do about it. The investigations that we do as a company are biased, meaning we hate bad guys. There's that bias. Frame of reference, they're good guys to some side. But the bias is, in fact, no one hires us when they're 5 minutes behind the problem. So when we respond to breaches, more likely than not, it's state-sponsored, state-condoned, and it's North Korea, Iran, China, or Russia. And people always say, well, how the heck do you know it's them? Attribution's hard in this, the interwebs of things, and it's a gray area, and anonymity, you can have it if you want it, for the most part. But we've been, since 2003, 2004 timeframe, with great rigor and discipline, every time we respond to a breach, we catalog all the forensic evidence. What's the malware the people are using? What's the passphrases they use when they encrypt stuff or if they have to access their malware? What's the infrastructure to use, the domain names they use, how they register their domains? And I can keep going for 650 more criteria if you want me to. I'd probably get lost after about 200. But I actually wrote the schema back in the day, just so here's what we got to track. Over time, you have to be, it would be, you notice patterns. You can't miss it. And so at the end of 2010, cataloging all the forensics of every investigation we were doing, we only had about 40 different threat groups. Every time we showed up and said, oh, it's, we'd go, oh, it's these guys from Russia, and fit right in bucket number 4. And we don't name any of these groups with fancy names like Fluffy Snuggle Duck or, Hug Me Bear. It's APT1, APT2, integers. It's all we know. We're simple people. We had 40 buckets in 2010. Today we have like 9,000. And it's not 9,000 threat groups. I still believe it's probably less than 25 real threat groups, maybe even less than 10, that are good, where you need to bring us in because a breach gets to a scale and scope where it's hard to respond to. But that's a lot of buckets of trace evidence now. And I think now when we respond, we can recognize Russia for the most part when we see them. China is still the most polite hackers in cyberspace, maybe besides us. Because they follow predictable rules, predictable patterns. It's proving to me there's centralized control of it all, or I don't know, or they wrote it down and are literally following checklists as they hack companies and go through what they do. But we do get to see the command line execution of what hackers are doing. We get to see, do they type in ls-al to do a directory listing or ls-la? Little differences between different operators. Same thing in Windows, different command lines. And so where we're at today, this is my long-winded answer because I learned a long time ago, lawyers trained me, when you get a question, just keep going. Then, if you have to testify for 15 hours, use 14 hours on your background, and then they might get a question in. But here's where we're at today, what I've observed anyway from our, 600 investigations last year, thousands over the last decade, cataloging every single one of them. And in addition to the forensics on premise, we have over 120 threat analysts in 18 countries that speak 32 languages, and we do believe attribution matters. Whether we give it to the world, whether we give it to our customer, or whether we feed it to the right agencies, if we don't know who's doing this stuff, there is no proportional response, there is no deterrence, there are no risks or repercussions to the bad guys. And we're starting to see what I would say, I could go by each one. China, I think, reduced their target set. I think the treaty actually worked. I think they're hacking less people today in the United States than they were in August of 2015. Mm-hmm. And the meeting between the two nations' leaders was in September of 2015. We're not missing China. They're not evading us. We know that. It would stretch credulity for me to think suddenly they went dark on us, but they're still very active in the U.S. We're saying between 50 to 80 companies hacked every month, right up till August of 2015. And then all of a sudden, it went down to 4. In August, then it was like 5, and it stayed around there. So we're pretty locked onto these guys. In the continental US, in my opinion, they are not hacking because you're doing M&A in China anymore. That's probably the biggest thing that got taken over. I don't know what's fair game for espionage. I don't know if anyone's defined that somewhere. Apparently healthcare is, and apparently hedge funds may not be. But we're just not seeing the hedge funds getting mowed down. That's China. Iran, 2017 year was the year of Iran. And the first time I responded to Iranian hackers, and I read the forensic reports, it was in 2008. We did not know it was Iran. Someone from an agency tapped us on the back. Maybe we didn't even care at the time. We were still trying to figure out what happened and what to do about it from a cybersecurity perspective at the victim. I know you wanted a shorter answer.
No.
And Iran,
I think it's really important to know intentions, capabilities vary.
Iran got good in the last 10 years. They've had unfettered practice operationally on the world's networks. And in 2017, for the first time in my career, we responded to Iran more than we responded to Russia. Huh. And so China still wins at scale and scope, even though they've dialed it back, by the way. I'm realizing, wait a minute, they dialed it back, but boy, are we out there responding to them. We have a bigger category of noise now. We don't know who's doing it. And that's because of cryptocurrencies. We can talk about that later, and the ability to extort anonymously is a problem. But Iran's dialed it up. They have zero-day capability. We've named 2 different groups out of Iran, and they have modular malware. They can adapt fast. they are a modern nation in the world of intrusions.
Kevin, can I ask, before
Yes.
you go to some of the other threat
Yeah.
actors, just on the government of Iran,
Yeah.
have you seen a spike in activity since the JCPOA discussions in particular?
When did those discussions happen?
Last month.
Got it. Those ones. No, they started earlier. In my opinion, from our observables, over 6,000 customers, the 600 investigations that we've done.
2 months ago.
Yeah, I think they had started probably by late 2016 ramping up, maybe right after the election.
And because exploit and attack, I mean, if you can exploit, you can always attack if your intent is to do so. With China, it's more of a CNE issue. It's more of an exploit issue until they really amass capabilities and can attack. But with Iran, are you seeing more computer network exploit and espionage? Are you seeing more critical infrastructure surveillance for potential attack vectors? What do you think?
So to avoid definitions, I'll speak my layperson observations. They operate under same groups, have different rules of engagement in different geographies. So if we see the IRGC hack somewhere and it's in the Middle East, it's primarily destructive. So if they hit KSA or somewhere else, it's delete stuff, kill it, scorched earth.
Sort of like Ukraine is Russia's practice field.
I would say
KSA
you got
is
it.
Iran's.
Ukraine is the tackling dummy for Russia, and I think the Middle East, there's a digital cocktail party going on there right now. We're responding there a lot. But when the same exact groups hack the U.S., I've observed they do hack our military, nowhere near the scale and scope of what China tries to do, meaning the defense industrial base. And they hack the media for whatever reason to see potentially what's coming out in the media. For whatever. So if your media and entertainment gets compromised by China, gets compromised by Iran, and in my opinion, it was not targeted by Russia, but in August of 2015, Russia changed their rules of engagement. After 18 years of responding to them on a daily basis, 3 things happened in August of 2015. When I was in the Air Force and responded to Russia, I still haven't figured out how they knew we knew, but every time we put eyes on networks that they had compromised, we never really saw them again. And it was frustrating. And so I wrote a book on incident response in 2001. None of you have read it, and that's a good thing. But if you read carefully between the lines as a super nerd, we train in that book how to respond with surreptitiously, to not be observed by anyone who has access to the machines you're responding on. And that was because of Russia, because I always wanted to see them at the command line in a wiretap or consensual monitoring, whatever words you want to use. August of 2015, we have a response at a government agency and I get a phone call, we can see what they're doing every day. And that's weird for me. I'll just give you the 4 things actually that Russia changed, all based on our experiences, our frontline observables. All of it happened in August of 15. It was weird. I get the phone call, hey, we're watching them, so they're letting us watch them. And trust me, they knew we were investigating at this agency because we were deploying our forensic software on 100,000 plus endpoints around the world. And the name of our forensic software was mir.exe, Mandia Intelligent Response.exe. The Russian word for peace is mir. It was never lost on us when we named our executable. It was, a little, hey, we're here. I wish, by the way, our guys changed the damn name of that when they deployed it. But it doesn't matter. You can see when a company or an organization is responding to you, especially if they're doing whack-a-mole and dynamically responding and you're the attacker. Sometimes you can't tell if the response is just IT acquisitions, normal IT cycle, but on this one, trust me, they knew. And they saw us and they didn't care. They stopped their counter forensics, and that surprised me because in my whole career, I had a tough time until a mature stage of the investigation, knowing what the Russian actors on the keyboard were after. And suddenly, Frank, like they always had a tradecraft of, if I hacked this machine, if I had hacked your machine, I'd have a working directory where everything I upload to your machine goes in that directory, everything I'm gonna take goes in that directory, and then I just go up a directory and delete that when I'm done. Bye-bye goes the evidence over time in a Windows machine and relatively immediately in a Unix machine. They stopped deleting their working directories. What that meant was we could see what they were taking. And that just surprised me. So they would stage everything in these directories and just leave it there. And then I know it's a human discipline to go back and delete that. And they chose not to. And that was weird for me. I'll keep going on the changes, but the bottom line, I'll just leave a third one. They changed their targeting. And the 4th one, they leaked documents. All 4 happened. 3 were in August. The leaking of documents happened earlier in Ukraine and Estonia, where you hack somebody and then magically WikiLeaks is laundering documents to the world, and then obviously the DNC breach.
And I'm not going to ask you about Wiki, but
So
the
what's
last country, North Korea, though.
So I've almost answered the question you asked, by the way, which is what the hell is going on now? What I'm trying to set up for you is for the first time in my career, after I think multiple decades of Russia being stable and predictable, they're not anymore. They changed the rule of engagement after 18 to 19 years is odd to me. Nobody else cared, but I was like, wow, this is a big deal. I was flying around the country, meeting our response teams, going, this is awesome. We can finally see what they're doing. And we learn neat things. Like when the Chinese steal, they normally steal by whole directories. When the Chinese review your desktop, if they hack you, it's normally an operator just sitting at a keyboard manually reviewing your files. Half time it's alphabetical. I hate to say it. It just is. It's like click on the directory that starts with an A and see what's there. And then they would rar up the whole directory and go. Russia was smarter about it, more economical about it. Run a search, come back later and see what the results are, and then grab what the results of the search are. They stole by file. These are things that I couldn't tell in the 90s. I mean, I just couldn't see it predictable enough. So anyway,
and last country,
North Korea, hacking
so
the hell out of Latin America right now, all for money. They're hacking to make money right now, at least where we're seeing them. And they're wildly unpredictable as well. So where are we at? Modern nations are developing capability. I'd love to poll the audience and what's the next nation that gets out there. And I can't predict, I can sort of predict China, can't predict Russia, definitely can't predict North Korea, and I really can't predict Iran. And that's after 2 decades of not that many surprises.
Kevin, it's fair to say any country with a modern military has a cyber capability that we ought to be thinking about, yes or no? Even though these are the most egregious and most active actors, I don't know how you can prosecute and fight wars tomorrow without a cyber capability, both from to support operations and the actual operations themselves. Yes, is that fair?
I think it is. You know, when you go to bed at night and you have all these creative thoughts and you either watch YouTube for 6 hours straight or you decide to capture some of them, the next war will have a massive, it'll be fought by software, first and foremost, in my opinion, or a lot of it will be. But the cyber component of it, I'm starting to realize, and it took too long in my career to notice this, cyber activities definitely reflect geopolitical conditions, and they will be the early warnings and indicators of aggression. That's just one man's opinion.
No, that's actually very insightful and spot on. And you raise so many important issues, but I want to get to one point.
I'm trying to do that without answering any questions.
No, you answered all the questions. I mean, the reality is I think when we talk cyber, it means different things to different people. I've coached all my kids' soccer teams, and it's kind of like kid soccer, everyone swarming that ball, that shiny object. You actually let us sit back and see the battlefield, see the different intentions, see the different capabilities, and we're finally spreading out the battlefield because we understand the enemy and we're starting to understand ourselves a little bit more. So I think that that's very important. But the thing that I want to get to is you raised deterrence. And I think we're in lockstep on this. I mean, we've been, in essence, blaming the victim.
Right.
So it's not to suggest that companies can and shouldn't do more. They should. They must. Yet, how many companies went into business thinking they had to defend themselves against foreign intelligence services, whether China, Russia, or you name the particular actor? How do you see that deterrent question until there are consequences put on the bad guy and not just blaming the good guys? What will that take, A? And B, I'd be very curious. I mean, you also mentioned rules of engagement. Others are defining those rules of engagement. Shouldn't we be pretty clear in terms of what we think our rules of engagement are to engage in offense, defense, and a mix in between?
So I think... So you asked a compound question,
Deterrence.
and when you didn't, it was 20-minute answer. So get ready for this. On the deterrence thing, you can't deter if you don't get attribution right. Period. So you have to. If I'm sitting in the Oval Office and giving the president any advice at all, first and foremost, it's for every cyber activity that you don't want to see happen. And if you're reading a headline of a breach and no one in the government can tell you who did it, we've got a problem. There will be no deterrence, though you can point the finger at someone. And then what it is, I think would be very hard to codify. I experienced this firsthand when Sony Pictures was breached in 2014. The day before Thanksgiving, my phone rings. One of our investigators is at Sony Pictures, and they say, I think this is North Korea. And I remember thinking, really? I don't know about that. 2 days later, I remember thinking, I think this is North Korea. And also thinking, so what do you do about it? The cyber domain is not the right domain to retaliate with North Korea. Just, I'm a layperson, I'm not an expert, but my gut tells me we're in the $10 million glass house in the cyber domain, and North Korea is in a mud hut with 7 IP addresses. Who wins in a cyber duel? We have everything to lose. Even if all our weapons work, we crashed a mud hut, we burned down a mud hut, great. So that kind of asymmetry, I think as a country, the unfortunate reality in the cyber domain is we have unique weaknesses. Many of our potential adversaries or folks that aren't ideologically aligned with us have advantages. And both in the cost of doing cyber because of the asymmetry, and I won't bore you with like 5 or 6 things I could tell you are uniquely a problem for us, but I'll give you one. Our critical infrastructure is in the private sector, a lot of it anyway, and that's not everywhere. So in a lot of countries, if there is a modern war and cyber attacks are occurring to be destructive or disrupt societies, a lot of countries can control their telecommunications defense posture because it's owned by the nation. What do we do here? Can the government impose its will on AT&T and Verizon or the mom and pops that are in the Midwest? I don't know. I doubt it's going to be all that impactful. So long story made short, first thing to have a deterrence, you got to get attribution right. It's getting harder, and there's only a couple ways to get attribution right. One of them is with international cooperation. And whether the government leads that or not, the private sector is going to do it. And the reason why, I can tell you right now, Russian citizens have a different experience on the internet than you do. It's already occurring. There are major organizations that block every single IP address from Russia to getting to any of their resources, period, any of their internet services. So if you're in Russia and you want to get to a lot of normal places on the internet, you got to go through a proxy. That's good and bad. The problem is every damn thing on the internet coming out of Russia now is through the Netherlands or somewhere else. But we have to figure out the rules of engagement, at least on the criminal side. Maybe you take espionage differently, and maybe we take something all modern nations can agree to, criminal acts, and maybe we have rules of engagement on how we pierce anonymity behind criminal acts so that we don't have things like WannaCry or something even better than that, or what happened in Ukraine with Petya, and make sure there's repercussions for. Imagine 2 million machines hit with a ransomware. I mean, imagine having a child having to be moved out of a NICU just because ransomware hit the hospital. I mean, it's crazy. We have to be able to put risks or repercussions to the folks that are masking behind the anonymity of the internet. And I think you'll largely get Western nations to do that. I even think you'll get any nation that wants to be a part of the global economy to do that. But there will always be nations that don't play along.
Kevin, can I raise something that you implicitly raised, and if I'm leading you on, and because it's something I believe in, tell me you disagree. But ultimately, you don't deter cyber. You deter actors from engaging in cyber.
That is correct.
So what works for Russia may not work for North Korea, may not work for the Carbonet gang.
Proportional response or the deterrence could be very different things.
But there has to be pain. Because if you just blame the victim, there's no consequence to dissuade, deter, or ultimately compel bad behavior. Yes?
I would agree.
And that takes different instruments, different tools, different approaches. On the rules of engagement, I mean, and you may have a very different opinion than me. I kind of feel we're never going to firewall our way out of this problem, defend our way out of this problem alone. I mean, just like counterterrorism post 9/11, and I was in the White House working Homeland Security, of course we needed to enhance our ability to prevent, preempt, and predict bad acts. But ultimately, you had to bring some of the element to the adversary. If the government does engage in that sort of activity, do they have a responsibility to inoculate the most critical of our critical infrastructures from what they're reaping, since they may pay for the consequences of that behavior?
I don't know. So that's a good thought. So you went right to a second order.
I'm going right there.
You're not just saying, hey, you already made the assumption. It's okay for us to make sure we can take down their utilities. But the tools and techniques that we do to do that, should we assume they have it as well in the responsibility to do that?
And to protect those who may pay the price for the real or perceived sins of others.
I haven't given that as much thought because until that decision and doctrine isn't even needed yet, because we haven't gone far enough to even get to that. You know what I mean? So you're ahead of me in your deliberation.
I'm never ahead.
Because I would argue we don't. You are in that one. here's the problem. If you inoculate us, it's highly probable you are jeopardizing the success of any offense you do.
Yep.
That's the unfortunate dilemma there. However, prior to solving that issue, there's probably about 5 ducks in a row that aren't shot yet that need to happen to even have to have that answer.
Let me ask now a different sort of question.
And by the way, by then, I can't
They're on to
imagine.
next
We're already out of
elements.
war.
Yeah,
If we're
yeah,
shutting down utilities. I can tell you the only 2 rules of the playground I personally have not seen broken in my career by nations, hacks that we'd attribute to nations, is I haven't seen one nation masquerading as another nation in cyber. I think we could all do it. Use it, but you'd get burned too, because you'd use the infrastructure that Russia or China's using.
It's a one and done in that case.
I think it is, and you got to pick your targets carefully or whatever. So we haven't seen a false flag that I think the adversary really meant. So everybody, if the false flags are, let's look like an anonymous group. Let's look like a criminal group, but not let's look like APT3 out of China or APT26 or AP whatever. I haven't seen it. If it's occurred, we missed it. And the second one I haven't seen, and I can be wrong here, fine, but in my experiences, I haven't seen destructive industrial control system aware malware on a U.S. utility. Just haven't seen it. And I would think I would be mindful of firing offense. First off, that doesn't mean anything. If someone has access to a utility and they want to take it down, the malware to bring it down is coming. 3 seconds later, it's running. Actually, it's before humans could stop it anyway. And it would have to be a machine that recognizes this is bad and stop it. I've never seen forward deployed ICS-aware malware in the continental United States yet by a modern nation.
But Kevin, let me just make a clarification here.
Yes.
So you're not suggesting you haven't seen the cyber equivalent of intelligence preparation of the battlefield.
Having access
target.
is there.
It's access, it's intent.
Yes, but I think I've always felt this even since the 90s for at least the major utilities. Because I can tell you this, I do believe, and I'm probably wrong now because I can think of other really evil ways that you don't want to say on camera.
Not here,
you give
not
the
now,
bad guys
please.
such good ideas. But you can imagine if we had a modern kinetic war, I think you got to go after our utilities. I think that's critical infrastructure number one, because you take the utilities out. If you're successful, you take out comm. For the most part, it's harder to communicate. You take out healthcare, you take out the finance, everything trickles down. And we're all running on diesel fuel, and the gas companies are happy, I guess. But but because of that, I do believe hacking a utility is a different skill set than gracefully trying to kill it or ungracefully blunt force trauma trying to kill it. I think we're going to see lots of failures. I think the successes we'd see in an all-out, gloves-off war would be utilities in the Midwest. The mom-and-pop shop utilities would have a problem. Yeah. And I can genuinely believe at this stage, when on offense, trying to shut down utilities at scale, a lot of times the actors on offense will not know the results of the attacks they're running.
Absolutely.
So they may have unintended consequences.
And there have been warning signs, as you've mentioned, in Ukraine with the grid, in KSA with not only the grid, but some ICS, petrochemical breaches. So that could also be a message that those are the practice fields coming soon to a theater near you if we don't take it seriously. So I just think, for what it's worth, that's worth thinking about. But I agree with you. The mixing and matching of TTPs, I don't think we've seen it at scale yet. And when we do, it would have to be an adversary that's ready to use it, to lose it.
I think so.
So let me ask, though, about deterrence, because I think that the traditional way of state capitals and diplomats driving foreign policy on traditional issues such as military force, war, and the like are very, very relevant today. Yet when I think about cyber, bank to bank, grid to grid, electric company to electric company, I think some of these critical infrastructures are going to assume as big of a role, if not in some cases bigger, since they're on the front lines. Do you see that happening at all? And because one of the things that I genuinely mean, Mandia deserves so much credit, is we always knew that the private sector is on the front lines. Right. We always knew that they're the vast majority owners and operators, at least in the U.S. But you're also part of the solution. both in terms of the intelligence piece and
Right.
in terms of the responses. So do you see that coming?
Yeah, well, realize we're part of the solution of just playing goalie, though. Only the government can be the deterrence. And we're, again, the Gretzky on a penalty shot analogy I've unfortunately used for 2 decades now. If Russia or China, any good hacker.
All
that's coming
caps
after
now,
a-
baby.
Yeah. If the Washington Capitals have a penalty shot against you, they're going to put the puck in the net. And so the unfortunate reality for the private sectors, for the most part, our role in cybersecurity is all defense. And when it comes to deterrence, proportional response, it's the government.
Yep.
And I'm not a proponent, and never will be, of any private sector organization hacking back or doing any activities that are policy decisions nations make. They can only do so when chartered by a nation to do it, in my opinion. So that's the problem is when you, and I speak for the private sector and saying we got to do defense because we're so darn, something bad happens on your networks, you have to withstand a heck of a lot of third-party inspection these days. Regulators are showing up. Pretty much it's all stick, no carrot if you get breached, and it's a lonely planet out there. You'll get 100 plaintiff lawsuits, and it's a frustration. And so that's why the deterrence is so important to the private sector is, Equifax gets breached. Who did it? Was there ever an article written about, we got to find these guys? I didn't read it. And after a while, it's frustrating. A lot of good people aren't working there now, and yet is anybody looking for the guys who did that? After a while, you start wondering. And so cyber, it's an interesting place because every single company today can have a breach. And we got to be careful as a nation to not automatically condemn that company when it occurs. And it's been sort of random, I hate to say it. It may be based on your industry or the timing or the news cycles, how well you're treated when you have a breach.
Well, let me get to future kinds of trends, and then I want to get to the market, and then open it up. But looking at at the end of the day, technology changes, human nature is pretty consistent.
Right.
So if bad things happen in the real world, they're happening in the cyber world. The difference is scale, reach, proximity, speed. All of these things that used to take more time, money, and effort to engage can now be done relatively quickly. But let's talk AI.
Okay.
Both red, blue, good, bad. What are your thoughts in terms of what you're seeing in terms of artificial intelligence? And then I'd be very curious on quantum computing, which if a nation state genuinely did have that ability to in essence, have 100% secure communications at speed. What are the implications there?
Good point.
And is the U.S. stepping up?
Can't monitor what you can't decrypt.
Absolutely.
So sometimes
That
it's kind of
changes the whole business model, doesn't it? It's a game changer.
If you ever read the payment card industry data security standard carefully, it says you need encryption on public networks because they know you need to monitor traders, and and the easiest and cheapest way to do that is network monitoring of clear text. So you got to be able to decrypt if you want to monitor. And so I think that
Would be a
goes
game
back-
changer for a lot of the industry, right?
Yeah.
If China.
Let me do the AI one first because I think that one's real and it's now already to some extent, and it depends on your definition of AI and how autonomous the systems really are. Last year we did over 300 red teams where companies hired us to break in, but don't just break in. Can you steal the CEO's email? Can you stop an assembly line? Can you get card data? Boring one, but important to customers.
Really
Can you get
important,
customer data and all these different things? And during those, I always talk to our red team guys, do we have a kill shot for all attack? Which tech do we get around? Which ones can we not get around? And I have a very good sense of what the biggest blockers are. There's only one thing that blocks us, and it's network-based, some kind of AI. We don't know what it is because you can't tell. You're on offense, and all of a sudden the network you've lost your back door. You've lost your connection. We can tell if an endpoint tech does that to us most often. So it's everyone, somewhere out there is some tech being deployed, observing network traffic, and we're doing an activity that triggers it and it blocks us because it sure as hell isn't rule-based stuff. For the most part, we have a kill shot for every single security technology out there right now. We just do.
Cool.
And for those who care, Kaspersky is actually exceptionally hard to evade right now. And it is cyclical, right? Depending on updates, depending on algorithms, the hack that works that day. For the most part, what you do in the first stage is spearfish. I hate to say it, works every time. after the spearfish, your second stage malware has to evade whatever the hell's in place. And the reason you get caught by the AI is it's very hard for an external person to know normal network login activity at a victim's site. So I can tell you on defense, it's starting to work. And then I think on offense, and now I'm not an expert, I think on the offensive side, I just think of all the disinformation you can create with AI. We had a group of folks inside FireEye that gave me a presentation on how AI can be used and influence, in IO operations, essentially. And you can fake people's voices. You can take like a face of anybody and any speech they made and just pack it with whatever words you want. And there's programs being written that can do that. We could all be watching nothing but fake news. I hate using that phrase right now, but I always grew up thinking whatever you read on the internet's about as accurate as graffiti on the Route 95 rest area. But we have a whole generation that gets all their news that way. So my theory on AI, I've always worried the most about the fidelity of all the information, all the screens that we have in front of us, and are they telling us the real thing? I think
from
AI,
a cyber active measures perspective,
on the defense, it's going to help.
Think about that.
On offense, it's going to be creepy because what it'll do on offense is it'll get us all to not know. It'll take the fidelity of our conclusions down a notch on everything we see. I think it's really going to do that if we're not careful.
Yeah, that's a scary thought, actually.
Yeah, I don't know.
Quantum.
Encryption everywhere is a challenge and a good thing. Good news, privacy of the communication. I hate to say it, I've never worried about it from a defensive standpoint. I've always said, if an attacker is getting your encrypted data, you may already have a challenge in the first place, because that means they're in a position where they can capture your data. That's not, I never like that, especially if we're operating here in continental US. You don't want anyone seeing your stuff, whether it's encrypted or not. So to me, I don't know. I don't think about it enough to give you a great articulate answer. Encryption everywhere all the time. Essentially, you're going to have to counterweight that with what you want to monitor.
Awesome. I mean, I do think, though, there's a clarion call to ensure the U.S. is leading in this domain. And I mean, it kind of gets to the going dark question in a different way.
Okay.
Because maybe it is human-enabled cyber means, or maybe the other way around, or maybe a convergence of both, or maybe an 80-20, or whatever it may be. But
I hear you.
I am somewhat concerned that there's this, and you had mentioned that the Chinese are the nicest actors in some ways. The flip side is they're no longer imitators, they're innovating. And they benefited from stealing a lot of secrets that they didn't have to invest in R&D, that they can leapfrog and go to the next generation. And I think they're doing so relatively smartly. Let's talk a little bit about the market. So, I mean, in terms of pure play cybersecurity companies, FireEye is like 5, 6 in the world. So
somewhere,
an amazing company.
We're number one, Frank.
Absolutely. Well, the truth is since you've been at the helm, it's been
the Associated
been a
Coaches
really good
poll.
run. And I'd be curious, though, do you see, and I hear from a lot of cyber companies, do you see a consolidation of the market coming, or do you see more boutique entities coming? I mean, everyone's talking about that end-to-end roll-up kind of across the various ecosystems. I'm not going to use all the buzzwords, but the truth is where do you see that going? And then on a personal front, I mean, would you have done anything differently with Mandia and when you merged with FireEye? Because, I mean, you're doing amazing things
Monday
now,
morning quarterbacking?
No, in all sincerity.
So in the first question, there's just far too many cybersecurity companies. And that's okay, I guess, because people saw a market and went there. What I've observed in cybersecurity is you better have domain expertise to make the right decisions. I'm privileged to meet most of the founders of these organizations, and I don't know if it's consolidation or not, but if I shared what I think the vision of the future of a great cybersecurity company is, I don't know why there's more than 10. I mean, I really don't. And I think maybe 10 years from now, that's what you're going to see. This isn't that hard, but it's become a marketplace. And now, yes, it's hard to stop the top 1% of hackers in the world. It is. But all the noise, We're in the second generation of cybersecurity defense, in my opinion. The first gen was probably AV and firewalls. Now we're beyond that, using more machine learning, AI, and analytics, and in fact, the threat went there, so we got to do something about it now. But I just think it's far too many. And by the way, Walk RSA, there's 10 ideas, 1,500 companies. I mean, you could be a third grader and have the same deduction I just gave you. So if I'm getting paid for this, I'm sorry. But seriously, it is too many. It's all the same stuff. And then what I'm seeing is an entrepreneurial community where no one's finishing what they're starting either. It's kind of odd to observe. It's like, because it's just so transactional.
It's sort of a pack mentality too. Everyone's trying to jump in and Me Too in a different kind of way. A lot of Me Too's.
But
in terms of
in fairness to that, we haven't solved the issue yet. Like security is a constant treatment. It's like you don't have risk elimination. You have, you just bring risk down, risk mitigation. So it's a treatment mentality, and we have to find cheaper, more efficient ways to treat it. And so it's good to see all this innovation, but do we need 1,500 companies in cyber? No. And if I'm a CISO right now, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering my phone from all those unknown numbers that show up with, hey, I got another endpoint for you. The good news is the majority of these new companies are better than the prior generation. And there's real tech emerging now that is a lot smarter than the signature-based world we had. So anyway, will there be consolidation? Maybe. Will some of these just go off the cliff? Yes. Will a lot of them last a lot longer than they should? Absolutely, because we overfunded, in my opinion, a lot of this area. I mean, you have companies out there, well, the whole rule of, you used to be you had to be profitable before you go public. Well, that went out the window in the 90s. But it's fascinating to me to see companies raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and at times I'm like, I don't know if it's all that good. It's or it's as good as everything else. But anyway, there'll be consolidation, there'll be a lot less companies. And there'll be better security, and it'll be at a lower cost.
And the Monday morning quarterbacking, 2020 hindsight always. Would you have done anything differently?
Yeah, I think whenever you Monday morning quarterback, you always can think of things you could improve. But I certainly don't want to relive the last 5 years. so it is what it is. It is. I truly believe this, and it's fun for me. I want to build software that automates what our people do on the front lines every day. I've always believed software is nothing but the automation of human process. The day machines are doing something we don't do, that's weird to me, by the way. That's when the robots take over and we all hate it. So we respond to breaches every day. We know how technology is being evaded. We literally see all the time what the market needs. Just build it, automate it, because I can tell you when WannaCry came out, it's fascinating to me, and I've had this happen about 10 times in my career. Where I'm like, holy crap, I got to tell everybody. It's already too late. The attack would have worked already. From the moment we have an indicator on how to block something, we're already too late to block it. And unless, that's if it's self-spreading. Unless it is a targeted attack and a one and done. And the nice thing about the targeted attacks, there should only be, at worst case, one victim for each one of them, if they're new. For every single 0 day that's been developed, unless it's a spreader that's just hammering everybody, there should only be one victim. And I think we can build that as an industry. Someone should build it. But I don't know how to build it without being on the front lines every day responding to breaches. And that's one of the challenges I've seen in cybersecurity. There are a whole bunch of folks that are just pure product companies. They're like, hey, customer, what do you want? And the customer wants the following. I don't want to worry about security. Okay, we'll build that. How do they learn what to build? Like, I'm still wondering, how do people know how John Podesta lost his email unless you were there? And so you have to build a self-learning system, see how the system gets evaded, and update it fast. And the first generation of security was the following. We're an AV company. If we miss something, please send it to us. I'm not kidding. And then you'd be out of the goodness of your hearts. First off, nobody ever found anything. But if you did, and by the way, it was already too late, you lost whatever email was on your system, then you'd have to send the malware to the AV companies. And the problem then became, when did the remediation occur? The next day, 5 days? If you sent 8 pieces of malware to any of the AV companies, you had no idea on what day the update that blocked that malware or quarantined that malware would occur. So you actually couldn't even remediate. We didn't build a learning system. It was flawed, but it was good for first gen. We are at FireEye building a learning system. Would I have done anything differently? The answer is no. Mandia is the side that learns what the market needs by being on the front lines, and the FireEye business is let's build what we learn on the front lines.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think you also found not only where FireEye is going, but the next billion-dollar kind of it really is that automated, because when you think
Yeah.
about automated information sharing and I mean, all these
Yes,
buzzwords.
you have to do it.
It has to. It has to.
You have to have
but
a
you
learning
need scale,
system,
and you need access to be able to get to that point. So, no, those are
And
fascinating.
you have to build a system, too, that under times of duress, it can ingest indicators and warnings
Yeah.
from anybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's got to speak taxi sticks. It's got to, and I do believe.
I'm glad you brought up sticks and taxis.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
And in fact, I believe if you do legislate anything in this city, you can legislate critical infrastructure needs to take those inputs.
Yep.
Because at that point, you got to. I always say, the citizens of this country want to know we can do shields up if we need to, and that's the only way to do it.
Awesome.
Is you're going to need the military, the intel. At least to protect critical infrastructure. You may not protect Kara's cupcakes, sorry, but you better protect Con Ed in New York City.
Absolutely right. Kevin, this has been awesome. I want to make sure we have time for questions from the audience. Please identify yourself when you have a question, and we'll start up front here.
Oh, hi.
Ron Marks, I'm actually on
Yeah.
the board here. I've been CEO a couple of times now, sitting across from guys who plop in my office who look like CIOs and CISOs.
Yes.
And they say to me, you know, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And I look at them and I say, well, if we do half of that, how much is it going to cost me?
Yeah, I hear you.
So the question,
Yeah,
I
good
would say
point.
back to the risk management questions you brought up before, which is if you're sitting across the table and your dude comes in there and says, hi, sir,
Yeah.
what do you want him to do? What do you want her to do in terms of protecting you? Because you're a target, to say the least. So what do you want in terms of protection for yourself first? And what would you advise companies
Me,
to do? Yeah.
personally?
Personally, actually, no, well, you and the company, actually. That would be fair.
So think about it all the time. Hate doing it on camera. But I can give you a couple examples. I mean, my use of email is terrible at this juncture because I've seen what it does to people when their email is Google searchable and released by a hacker. It is a physiologically impactful moment that destroys people's lives. Now, I'm not saying, you know, I have 1,000 skeletons in the closet, but the email I get as CEO has HR stuff in it, legal stuff in it, who we're thinking about. It's corp dev stuff. It's stuff that I always imagine I don't want my opinion known. Mm-hmm. I hate to say it. And I'm not a bad guy. I'm a patriot, and everything I do is Boy Scout. Every email I get, I write back, Roger that, period. Nobody knows if that's yes or no. It's an acknowledgement. I've seen your email, and I've read it. And I've been doing that for over 2 years. It's annoying to me that email, and by the way, here's what happens when you stop emailing people. People figure it out, and then you start getting 100 texts an hour. And now I'm living in text world, and that's annoying to me. But personally, there's those sort of things. What do I tell folks? It's hard for me to sit down with any CEO, and I get it. I'm less than 24 hours removed sitting in a board meeting at a major bank, and they're going, what do I do? And it was the CEO asked in regards to how do I know how good I am and how good do I need to be? Two different questions, and the answer is different per industry. Here's what I do, and here's what I recommend any CEO do. You want unvarnished truth, you red team. To hell with the thousands of vulnerabilities you're going to find, because any vulnerability assessment, by the way, that's table stakes anyway. In our country, you're deemed by some experts as negligent or irresponsible if you don't patch internet-facing systems. Fine. Table stakes is scan your internet presence and patch the hell out of it all the time. Crappy that we have to do it, but do it. But red team what really matters. And that'll give you unvarnished truth. And I'll give you a quick example. Every once in a while, my sister's a great guy, Steve Booth. I love the guy. He'll come in, and first he can't win, because if anything's in the red, I'm pissed off. If anything's in the green in his charts, I don't believe him. And if it's in the yellow, I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to feel? I can't get pissed about it. You know what I mean? So he's learned, let's put everything in yellow. We're not perfect, we're not perfect. You know, true story. CISOs can't win anyway. You red team because it withstands third-party inspection, and I genuinely believe there's nothing else you can do. It's not reasonable to go beyond that. If you secure everything all the time, nothing's important. Yep. So you figure out what really matters. And ask the CEO, what do you not want to have happen in cyber? I don't want to get shut down. That's a tough one. But hell, we'll red team it. The problem is we're going to come back, we shut down 3/4 of your network. Fine. But we better not do that. Second, I don't want to lose my email. Fine, red team it. Third, I don't want to lose this production. I would argue anything that's mission critical, and I actually have 7 criteria for it. Here's how you find out what the red team, if you don't already know. And that's the bare minimum you should do as a major organization. The problem becomes you get the small to medium companies and they don't even know any better. And they've outsourced everything to the cloud anyway. That's a tougher answer. But if you're a public CEO right now and you're not red teaming stuff, I think you ought to. Because getting back to Steve Booth, every once in a while he'll say something. I turn right to one of my red team guys going, check that. Do we really have 2-factor authentication required for every VPN account? I'll give you 2 anecdotal things for the hell of it. Both really happened. Why BS about it? One, the amount of VPN access we see that is single factor is amazing. And China's figured it out. They have the magical ability when they're doing espionage to find that one account out of 70,000 where there's no 6-digit RSA token required or no Duo Mobile. By the way, there's ways around Duo. So every company's like, I was told we all had 2-factor authentication. You couldn't access this, that, and the other thing without it. I would say 90+% of every company has an exception. And it might be 99% have an exception. I'll give you another example. Most multinational companies, it's hard to secure what you don't know about. Most of them don't even know where all their offices are. I hate to say it. We were responding to a breach once, and I'm like, sir, your office and I can't remember, somewhere in Pennsylvania. And I'm like, your office in Pennsylvania's got a compromised host. And I'm not kidding. The CIO was like, we don't have an office there. I'm like, yeah, our guy's there now. He's there. It's your office. Either we broke in and we don't know where the hell we're at. And true story, it's hard to secure companies that are growing inorganically, massive different cultures, multinational. Security means different things in different geographies. If you're a CEO, protect what matters most, red team it, get unvarnished truth. It's the best you can do.
Roger that. Now, the truth is attack surfaces are growing exponentially,
yeah.
right? So, even when they're not owning. So there's the digital asset component, and then there's the attack surface with the Internet of Things and other sorts of bring your own devices to work, and that's a tough environment right now.
Yes,
really
it is, Frank.
We've got another question back here, and please identify yourself. Wait for the mic.
By the way, you won't like what you get from the red team. The win is it took them 5 weeks to get it. You're like, all right, that's long enough that maybe no one else will try that long. I hate to say it.
Well, this is a 2-for-1, if you agree. 2 questions, pick either one you want to answer, preferably both.
I'm amazed anyone's asking questions after I've been
First question,
talking for 20 minutes.
how would you recommend the federal government and DHS in particular improve their indicator threat information sharing? Question number 1. Question number 2, how can companies such as yours work more effectively with the federal government, DHS in particular, with regards to threat sharing?
That's a great question.
It is a
Joe
good
Marks,
question.
I think, is here watching because he just wrote that piece.
It's when it comes to threat sharing, it's all about timeliness, and no time is too soon. For us in DHS, we work very well with them. In fact, it is worldwide. More often than not, as we respond to breaches, we're working with some local government authorities at this point. In the United States, and that's worldwide. But in the United States, 15 years ago, we didn't see the FBI at every case, and we never saw the NSA. It has happened where we will show up and government folks are there from different agencies. So the government knows about most of the breaches that we're responding to in the continental United States. Usually it's law enforcement. DHS usually finds out as well. Now going specifically to information sharing, we do share information in a timely manner with DHS. The exception, and I'm probably going too far in sharing this, when we are at a customer site that's under duress, we won't usually share the warnings and indicators till we get remediation, if they're all new. Does that make sense? Because we're under the fog of war. I don't think you can remediate if the world knows what you're using to remediate. You kind of have to do, I call it, again, dating myself, I used the analogy of Gretzky in a penalty shot is what you're up against with the Russians. It's a Mike Tyson uppercut remediation plan that we go with, meaning you got to get all the cancer out of the network the minute you try. If remediation fails for our customers the first time, it is amazing how fast the determination wanes over time to get the remediation right. And it is it's not catastrophic. It is very annoying, depending on who hacked you, to have a failed remediation. If it's a criminal group, you can recover quickly and get them out. But if it's an advanced, persistent Chinese slog fest on your networks and your first remedial attempt fails, they pepper in so much new stuff that the cost of your second remediation might be higher than the first attempt that failed. And I believe we jeopardize the success of remediation if we share with the whole world all the indicators and warnings we're going to use to fully diagnose the scope of an incident. And it's my understanding, if it gets to DHS, it's getting to the world. So that being said, we're not perfect. And we have a whole group of folks that work with DHS all the time that are giving DHS as much value as they can. So we almost have to raise our own people to remediate. That's my prediction. And you're probably wondering, did he just answer my question? The reality is, we're not at the stage as an industry yet where we're getting, that's not true. It depends on the group. We're better than ever before. DHS is getting indicators, in my opinion, from virtually every single breach. Indicators, in my opinion, are anonymous. It is almost impossible to share anything in stacks and taxi and stick. I can't even say it now.
Sticks and
taxi, because you reversed it on me, and now I can't say it. And we created a schema 7 years before the government had a schema on sharing TTPs. We created a thing called Open IOC. As a self-funded startup under a Thai restaurant in Alexandria, nobody noticed. But you can share all this intel without attribution to where it's coming, without who the victim was. So the bottom line is it's better today than ever before. There are occasions where we can't get the most timely intel into the bucket. But I think the vast majority of all of the intel that we have is reaching agencies around the world in time.
That's awesome. And the Tyson uppercut, even if you can defend against that, you better watch your ear too, because he's got.
But I've always said there's a lot of companies that they're afraid of remediation because they're like, if we remediate, are they going to come back even harder? You already have that problem. It's always been an immaterial question to ask whether remediation is successful or not. It's like, do you want it to fail? You'd rather, you have to be able to defend against what the internet's going to bring to your doorstep. And that's immaterial.
We got time for a couple more questions right up front here, and then there.
So 2 questions, if I may. The first one, you had mentioned the Russian hackers
Can you
earlier.
please identify yourself?
I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, Ralph Martins. I'm an alumni, and also I run a startup cybersecurity company. One of the ones that's probably going to get consolidated out
You're
of
one of the
business.
10 ideas.
There you go. Yeah, hopefully.
Okay.
You had mentioned earlier the Russian hackers that allowed you to observe them,
Right.
and I was wondering if, and I don't even know if you can get into this, but if there was any indications that this was maybe a disinformation campaign, they knew you were observing them, so they might have been doing certain things to kind of throw you off the path.
So one thing we did notice there, and I think we've briefed this publicly, was, and they may have been playing a game with us, and why not? They're all under 30. Yep. It's a whole different generation. I don't understand doing this now. But at the end of the day, what we noticed is about 10% of every machine had a total different set of malware on it. They were observing our efficacy in detecting. So imagine 90% it was the same package, and 10% was different. So we're showing
like real-time dry runs.
every
is
single
what you're saying.
You got every single day. There's there's 10 more machines compromised. 9 looked one way, and 1 looked a different.
I never thought of it.
I do believe this. If you're training operators, somewhere out there you got to have a playground. And I hate to say it, we have a couple organizations that may be kind of the live firing network for them.
Yep. Second question, if I may, I was wondering, where do you stand on cyber attribution? It seems like there's some folks who believe attribution in cyberspace has been hard. It's hard now. It's going to continue to be hard. Other folks think it's becoming easier. But I thought I heard you say something earlier, which led me to believe you think it might be harder and harder over time.
I think anonymity is a choice of good hackers. They choose whether they want to be anonymous or not. And I think it's that simple. So if the operations in cyber are from modern nations, they have the choice. And one of the ways they don't stay anonymous is by using their custom malware, using their infrastructure and signaling. It has been my belief that when the Russians hack, they're wearing a Russian jersey. I mean, they're trying to be surreptitious, but when you catch it, they're letting you know. They're not going overboard. Let's use them, English character set. Let's use English settings on the keyboard. Nope, we're still finding Russian at times. We're finding English as well, but with a Cyrillic keyboard and other things. There's a lot of telltale signs that I know they could change and they know they could change, and they're not. Anyway.
Another question here, and we've got time for maybe one after, and then Teresa, you got the last word.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Kevin, for your
Thank you, sir.
excellent wisdom and thoughts on this important topic. My name is John Holmblad. I teach cybersecurity at Johns Hopkins Carey Business School and actually at the University of Maryland. I do cybersecurity in the U.S. Senate in cyber operations, and I also talk about cybersecurity. And I was just at a conference a month ago in London speaking on the cybersecurity issues as they relate to the Internet of Things.
Yes.
And one of the prominent, there were the three major infrastructure providers in the wireless industry were present: Nokia, Ericsson, and of course Huawei. And my question to you is, how do you view them? I mean, on a CVS scale, if you will, are they a 10, or where are they at relative to the risk to the U.S. market if they were to supply their products into this market?
So in general, not speaking specific to that, my observation, so we don't have a great business in Russia. We're an American company. Kaspersky is probably not going to have a great business here. The ground truth on who you do business with is going to be tied to geopolitical conditions between nations, where your company resides and where the provider resides. If there's duress or war or tensions between nations, take Kaspersky as an example. Could their next update on the endpoint do whatever the hell Kaspersky wants it to do? The answer is yes. It's executing right there as admin. And so the challenge we have isn't maybe if Kaspersky's evil or not, it's whether the government that hosts their headquarters function can impose its will during times of duress. And that's the risk you take when you do business. So that's the best way to answer it. You gotta, and that's why allies buy from allies.
Teresa, you've got the last question. Kevin, you got 5 minutes.
By the way, I'm not an economist, and everything I just said is not a professional opinion. It's just gut, dude from Pittsburgh thinking about this and saying, you know what, you got to buy from people you trust. And even if you trust Eugene Kaspersky and you trust his people, do you trust whether their government can impose its will on the actions of Kaspersky? That's the problem.
Hear, hear.
All right, Kevin, thanks so much for being here. This has been great.
I kept a few of you awake.
Yeah.
It was good.
So I'm Teresa Shea, and I'm over at a small not-for-profit called Incutel. I have two quick questions. Two quick questions for you. Love to get your insight into the debate on companies hacking back against attacks.
Yes.
And the second one is, we're seeing more and more of the government move into using Microsoft 365
Right.
for
Right.
private companies are starting to do
Right.
that. Do you view that as a more secure move?
So quick answers for both. Hacking back's a bad idea. It's always been a bad idea. I remember years ago, real smart people have said, hey, it's like the piracy stuff of the 1880s or 1780s or who the hell knows. Piracy, you see the ship, you know who the hell it is. It's tangible. In an area where there's anonymity, you don't even know what the hell you're hacking back. So I can give you I actually have about 10 reasons why, but first and foremost, if there's 1,000 companies compromised by a group out of Russia, and one company decides to poke back and change the rules of engagement, there's 999 other companies on their knees for the retaliation. It's a country's policy that just got impacted too, by the way. And what's the hack back? What are you trying to do with it? Are you trying to identify who's there, destroy what's there, raise the costs? There's so many problems with it. It's a bad conversation in reality. So I can tell you this. Would you allow a hackback into Germany, even though it's being used by Russia? Would you allow it? Well, and Germany might say, you can do it, you can't do it. You'd have different arrangements with every nation unless you want to do the whole thing surreptitiously. It's complicated. You never know what you're really touching when there's network address translation in front of it. It's obvious when you try it. when you try it and fail, does that change and provoke a change in rules of engagement? So I truly believe this. The minute the private sector does it, our government may lose an aspect of how it does governance. I mean, it's going to be crazy. And by the way, I'd be pissed if I was one of the 999 other companies that said, you guys hacked back. To be successful in the hackback, you have so much knowledge about these folks. How the hell did you get hacked in the first place almost, you know what I mean? And by the time you're doing it, you could have been better served just sharing, hey, here's what we got to do to the other 999 victims. But bottom line, no, you don't want to heighten the risk in cyberspace arbitrarily because of the whims of the risk profiles of some leader in the private sector. Now, here's the good news. Only twice in 1,000 breaches have I ever had a high-level dialogue at a company, hey, let's hack back. Both times, very rapidly, the frustration died down to what the hell would we do that for and how much worse could it get? And I'll leave you with one following analogy I've used for 20 years on this topic, since 1996, 22 years. If you're hacking back, here's the probability. You're getting your ass kicked in a wrestling match. You're already pinned on your back. And you're like, I'll feel good if I just flick them in the nose. Because that's all you're doing when you hack back. Because they're coming at you and they're already in. You better be damn sure they're out of your network before you do it. So why the hell would you even do it? I don't see a reason to do it. It's in the providence of the government. Keep it there. And you had a second question. For most companies, in my gut, all that is more secure. I hate to say it. We have to consolidate. We don't have enough security expertise. The cloud providers can't secure everything for you. We learned that with AT&T, Verizon. No offense to those companies. They're telecommunications companies first. And when government entities, organizations, and companies say, you guys have a security plan and give us clean pipes, no one place will ever be able to give you clean pipes. The cloud providers will always bow down to giving you drive space, disk space, provisioning, IT at low cost, and security will always be a bolt-on. But we'll all build security programs around those things. For most customers, the consolidation at stuff, it's almost like going back to dumb terminal and mainframe. I hate to say it, but security is actually easier then. And when you think about what we're doing right now, is we help companies migrate to the cloud. We are finding ways now to go back to monitoring who's accessing what. That's not that bad. So I feel like for most companies, going to the cloud is more secure. There are some companies, usually defense industrial base, and a few companies that can do better security on their own for different programs. So it does depend. And I'll just leave it at the final observation I've had. For companies that have had major breaches and they want to get to a better security posture, they very quickly go, here's what we're going to put in the cloud. And they go do that. And they very quickly go, here's the 10% we're not going to put in the cloud. And they go do that. It is amazing to me that everybody spends all their effort and time on what the hell do we do about the 80% in the middle? Does it go to the cloud or not? And then people, a bunch of swirl happens for 3 years as companies debate it all. But at the end of the day, it's been my observation, no cloud provider can afford to have a breach of their infrastructure. And I don't think they're going to, or if they do, it might be problematic. But I think they won't. So your risk will be the applications you're putting in their infrastructure. And I'll leave you with the last thought. It's on you to secure your stuff in the cloud. And no matter what packages a cloud provider is going to offer for security conscious organizations, they're going to go the extra mile anyway. So,
Kevin, the tyranny of time requires I be a tyrant. Thank you for your time, your insights, your perspective, and
thank you very much.
And leadership on these issues. So thank you.